Hi guys, my name's Desiree, and if you found your way to my channel, welcome. And get on in here. My guess is that you either love makeup or you're looking to get inspired, and maybe, just maybe, you're looking for a little bit of both, because that's what we're here for. In each episode, I am going to do my makeup while sharing an inspiring story of another person that I feel like deserves to be told. And if you're into any of these things, maybe like the video, subscribe to the channel, and feel free to comment anybody that you would like to see me cover and tell their story in one of our future episodes. And don't worry, I'll link all the products that I use. Okay, so the person that we are going to talk about today, I'll give you a few hints and clues to get started. She is one of the most famous and iconic women of all time. Now, I know that could be anybody. So I'll give you another clue. From birth to 12 years old, she was raised in Kansas by her grandparents, where her life seemed pretty consistent and stable. But after she turned 12, she went to go live with her mom and dad. And that's when things kind of took a turn, because from the ages of 12 to 18, she would actually live in 6 different cities and go to 6 different schools. That's a lot. In her high school yearbook, they actually wrote under her name, "The girl in brown who walks alone." I don't know about you, but that kind of sounds really sad. But it also sounds intriguing, especially since we already know that this is going to be an inspiring story. She also attempted to go to college 3 different times. She started out at a junior college in Philadelphia, and then 2 separate times, she actually went to Columbia University in New York City. And I looked it up. If you were to apply to Columbia University right now, their acceptance rate is only 3.8%. So while things are a bit rocky, she is obviously very gifted if she's able to get into a school like Columbia twice. Her father had a really bad addiction to alcohol, and it said that his addiction caused him to lose his jobs and to struggle financially for most of his life. But in addition to that, the family was so embarrassed of him. You know, she had a couple things that she was dealing with behind closed doors, and I think we can all relate to that. This would go on to shape her into the person and the woman that she was becoming. Now, I'm still just giving clues, but we're almost done with the clues. So at 39 years old, this person disappeared. Vanished off the face of the earth and has never been found. There are facts about what happened, but there's also some conspiracy theories about what happened. And being that this is my first episode, I want to try to stick to the facts just for the integrity of what could maybe be the future of this channel. So anyway, I'll stick to the facts, and then maybe at the end, I'll add in the juicy juice. But despite all of the setbacks that we have talked about that this person experienced in their lifetime, and we've only named a few at this point, not only did she break through the barriers that confined her, but she was essentially doing it for future women. Any guesses yet? All right. Well, let's get started. If you guessed Amelia Earhart, you are correct. Amelia was born on July 24th, and that makes her a Leo. So shout out to all the Leos. And if she was alive to this day, she would be 127 years old, but she's not. And tragically, she died so much earlier than she should have. But we'll get to that. Amelia grew up in Kansas. She grew up with her grandparents, her mom's parents, in the house that her grandfather built. So her grandparents essentially raised her from the time she was 0 to 12 years old. The house, I did look into it, has since been turned into a museum that kind of commemorates and pays tribute to Amelia's life and the role that her early life played in the history that she would go on to create and become infamous for. Her parents' names were Edwin and Amy. And I actually thought it was super cute because her mom's name is Amelia, but she went by Amy for short. And then obviously she named Amelia after herself, but they never called her Amy. They called Amelia Amelia. It said that Amelia's grandfather forbid Edwin and Amy to get married. And the reasons that I found are that Amelia's grandfather did not feel as though Edwin was successful enough or kind of had his life together enough to give his blessing for him to marry his daughter. He wanted proof that Edwin could take care of his daughter and any, I guess, potential grandchildren or children that they would have. He had checkpoints and benchmarks that needed to be met. And the biggest one was that he had to be bringing in at least $500 a month in order for him to give his blessing for the two of them to be married. It actually took Edwin 6 years to get a job or get to a point in his career where he was making that kind of money. Eventually, Edwin meets Grandpa's requirements and they have a small wedding in Kansas. So after Edwin and Amy get married, Edwin is like super focused on his job, which makes sense because he had to put so much focus on it for the last 6 years in order to marry the woman that he loved. So yeah, he had some habits and he was pretty much known as a workaholic. And I'm guessing, because there wasn't much information on it, that this was probably the reason why the children didn't live with them, because he was constantly traveling and chasing his career. And I guess Amy was just along for the ride doing that with him, because they left and moved to Missouri because he was an attorney for some big railroad company. And the girls, it was Amelia and her little sister Muriel, they stayed with the grandparents and were raised in Kansas. I don't think they lived too far from their parents because Kansas and Missouri, in certain parts, they like butt up right next to each other. But, I don't know. And I don't even know what Amelia's mother was doing. Like, was she just kind of like along for the ride, or was she doing her own work? Because there really isn't much information about her doing work. So I don't know. When Amelia turned 12, it was during that year that her and Muriel would move to Des Moines, Iowa, because Amelia's dad was getting a promotion and being relocated for work. He worked for the Rock Island Railroad Company. And I feel like at the time, like everybody took the railroads. So it was like a big, big deal. So when Muriel and Amy move out to Des Moines to finally be with their parents, one of the first things they did together as a family was they went to the Iowa State Fair, which is kind of cool. So it's at this state fair that Amelia sees an airplane for the first time, and she's not impressed, which I guess I can't fault her for that because it was so early. Like, I think it was only 3 years prior that the Wright brothers had actually had the first documented flight. So it was probably a very primitive design. It probably was not cute. And it probably looked like more a concept than something that was actually like understandable that you could wrap your brain around. But either way, she saw her first airplane at the Iowa State Fair. And if you remember from the clues that I shared in the beginning, from 12 to 18 years old, Amelia would actually live in 6 different cities and go to 6 different schools. So definitely a very difficult time in anyone's life when they're growing up and kind of figuring out who they are and making those relationships with people that you could potentially be friends with forever, and constantly being on the move and not really settled anywhere that you go. And this is kind of when we find out that her father, Edwin, had a really severe addiction to drinking. And apparently the addiction was so bad that at this point, he's like spiraling. First, he lost his job. Then they ran out of money. And then that's when Amelia's mom, Amy, took the girls and left him and moved in with a girlfriend, like in a different city, like I think Chicago they moved to at that point. It's known that Amelia lived a very, very healthy lifestyle. Like, she ate healthy, she exercised regularly, and she did not smoke or drink. And it's speculated that a lot of that had to do with just living with her father, or knowing that her father had such a difficult relationship with alcohol. And it's almost like she kind of despised those things that were so toxic to her family and to her childhood. But what was equally important to her was financial stability. So she was always concerned as well about making sure she had a roof over her head, she had money in her pocket, and that she was taken care of. Because I guess she was always used to not knowing, like, is dad going to have a job this month or this week or whatever. So we're getting into the point where she graduates from high school. And this is when we shared one of the clues was that in her high school yearbook, it was written, Amelia Earhart, the girl in brown who walks alone, which I just feel like is so sad as a way to be remembered in your high school yearbook, knowing how pivotal and monumental those years can feel when you're going through them. But just so you know, the color brown was actually Amelia's favorite color. So the fact that she was always walking around in brown was kind of like an acknowledgement to her favorite color, which I guess was positive. Now, after high school, Amelia went to a junior college in Philadelphia. It was called the Ogontz School. It was a preparatory high school and a junior college all in one. And it was said that at the first break, which was Christmas break, she went to Toronto, Canada, which is where her little sister Muriel was going to school. She was still in high school and she was going to school in Canada. I don't know how she got to Canada or why she was in Canada, but Muriel was going to school in Canada and Amelia went to go visit her. So while Amelia is spending Christmas break with her sister in Canada, she meets an amputee. And this amputee and her, they connected, they built a relationship, they got talking, and she just was so enamored with what this person had been through. This person was in the military fighting in World War I. And Amelia was just so taken over by the fact that the vets were getting wounded. And this upset her so much that she actually opted not to go back to the Ogontz School in Philadelphia. And instead, she stayed in Toronto and got a job in a veterans hospital where she became a volunteer nurse. And she would do this for like 2 years. So she was in it. So after Toronto, Amelia decides she wants to go spend some time with her mom. And her mom is now living in Massachusetts. I don't know how, but they are just all over the place, traveling all over the country, living all over the country. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but Amy is now living in Massachusetts and Amelia decides this is probably a good time to go visit mom. So while Amelia is staying with her mom, Amy, in Massachusetts, she decides, I'm going to go back to college, but I'm going to go and apply at Columbia University in New York City. She gets in. That's amazing because it's so hard to do. So she gets into Columbia and she goes, and she's there for about a year. And her mom's like, me and dad are getting back together. He's living in LA. So I'm going to go out to LA and be with your father. So after Amelia's parents get settled and back together in LA, here comes Amelia. And she's ready to see how this is going to play out with her parents. Well, while she's in LA, she goes to her first ever air show. And when she's at the air show, she goes on her first ever plane ride. It's recorded that after she went on this first ever airplane ride, that as soon as she left the ground, she knew. She knew that she needed to fly. She knew that she was meant to fly. Like, it was like she just knew. There was no denying it. She was going to fly. So shortly after this life-changing air show, Amelia signs up for flight lessons. And interestingly enough, her instructor is a woman. And I just love that because I feel like with this being such a male-dominated industry at this point, and probably still to this day, it was probably so refreshing for Amelia to walk into her first day of flight school and realize like there's other women like her that want to do things that they're not supposed to do at this time, or that most women aren't doing at this time. Just in case you're wondering, her instructor's name was Netta Snooks. I thought that was a cool name. At this time, and we're in the early 1900s, having a pilot's license is not actually required to fly a plane, which is insane. But it's the early 1900s. So the fact that after a year of flight school, Amelia actually receives a pilot's license, this is a big deal because she's one of the first women to actually have a pilot's license. And it was direct from the NAA. So I looked into the NAA to kind of see what it was. And it's essentially a nonprofit organization that essentially oversees what they call the art, the sport, and the science of aviation and space flight. So this is like a pretty prestigious organization that she was given her pilot's license from. So kudos to her. And Miss Snook. I mean, I didn't even have to look this up to know, but flying is a super expensive hobby. Owning a plane, I can't even imagine. But Amelia like literally worked constantly. She had like 5 jobs at the same time just to try to get enough money so that she could afford this hobby of flying that she had and loved so much. She was a file clerk. She was an office assistant. She was a photographer. Like, I didn't even know she had a camera. We've never talked about her taking pictures, but apparently she was a photographer. I don't know if she was a good one, but whatever. She was doing whatever she had to. And she was a truck driver. So like, she didn't care what it was or what she had to do. Like, she was doing anything to fuel and fund this passion to fly. I can't imagine working 4 or 5 jobs just to pay for the plane. And that doesn't, like, I don't even know where she probably slept in the plane, honestly. I mean, like, she probably couldn't afford rent. So she probably, well, no, she probably stayed with her parents. Yeah, that's right. She was with her parents. Anyway, so as you may have guessed, our little Amelia, after a few years of owning her own plane and having her dream become a reality by all of her own hard work, she had to sell it because it was just too much. And the parents decided to separate again. So her mom reaches out to Amelia and she's like, it's not working out with me and Dad. I have to get out of here. We gotta go. So perfect timing because Amelia sells her plane and takes the money that she got from the sale of the plane and she buys a car. The car she buys, she uses to drive cross country with her mom to go stay with her sister Muriel again. It sounds like Muriel has always got her shit together. Like, she's just steady Eddie. She's got it all locked down. Like, inspired by Muriel. So Amy and Amelia drive cross country to Boston from LA in a car that Amelia used the money from selling her plane to buy. And they go to Boston, where Muriel is now no longer in high school, no longer in college. She's now like a full-blown teacher, like living her adult life. So now they're living in Boston with Muriel. And it's at this point that Amelia decides she wants to go back to school. It's been a long time coming. She keeps putting off her own education. Something comes up, the money runs out, her parents break up again, and she just feels like it's time to go back to prioritizing her education and her future and what she wants to do with it. So she re-enrolls for a second time at Columbia in New York City, and they let her back in. I mean, I didn't know Columbia gave second chances. She must have been super smart. So Amelia moves to New York City because now she's back at Columbia. And I don't think any of us saw this coming. But she runs out of money after the first year and she has to drop out again. So Amelia goes back to Boston where her mom and her baby sister are living. Muriel is just taking care of everyone like a good little baby sister. And at this point, Amelia decides, I'm going to become a social worker. This is what I want to do. I'm going to become a social worker, and this is going to be my life. So she becomes a social worker while she's living in Boston. And at the same time, her passion for flying, it just keeps pulling and tugging and knocking at her heartstrings. It's like, hi, Amelia. I'm still here. You still love planes. You still love flying. We're not going to let you rest until you start flying. So Amelia, do you remember the NAA, the National Aeronautical Association? Amelia decides to become a member of the organization. And she becomes a member of the NAA organization in the Boston chapter, and it allows her to fly for fun to keep up with this passion and hobby of hers that she loves so much. So that worked out really, really great. So now Amelia is about 31 years old. She has dedicated the majority of her life to being a volunteer nurse for veterans, a social worker, a flight enthusiast, a pilot, an airplane owner and operator, and anything else I may have missed. Oh, and her mom's wing woman through life. And she's essentially an expert at having to restart her life every time something goes wrong. So she joins the NAA, and there's this guy, George Putnam. And George was part of the flight crew that worked with Charles Lindbergh. Now, Charles Lindbergh, like about a year before this, he is famous for doing the first transatlantic flight solo, which is essentially going from one continent to another, flying over the Atlantic Ocean. So he probably went from somewhere here in the United States on the East Coast to probably somewhere like near London or something. So anyway, this guy, George, was running the team that like publicized this whole thing with Lindbergh. So when he meets Amelia as this one in a million female pilots, like there just weren't female pilots back then, or at least not many. And definitely not many in the same city. Like they were like scattered across the US, but like it wasn't like there was a lot of them. Like they were pretty much solo in whatever city they were in. So anyway, he meets Amelia through the NAA organization, and he's like, oh my gosh, I could do the same thing that I just did with Charlie Lindbergh, but I could do it with you, and you could be the first woman to do a transatlantic flight. So it's just like beside himself that he came up with this amazing plan. And of course, Amelia is excited. Like she wants to be a part of something so amazing. And just like a first for women, arranges a team of people to fly over the Atlantic Ocean to Europe so that they can say that Amelia and their NAA organization was the first to put a woman on a transatlantic flight. Well, it was a huge success. The only issue was that there were two other people on the flight with Amelia. There was a pilot and a navigator and Amelia. And Amelia said she never even got to so much as touch the plane while she was in it. Like she literally was just sitting in it. She didn't do anything. She had not a single hand in flying that plane or getting it across the Atlantic Ocean. So she was kind of like a little let down that she didn't have more to do with the actual flight itself, and that it was more about this grand PR campaign that the first woman did a transatlantic flight. But like it wasn't like clear on the details. So anyway, people start to realize that like she didn't have a lot to do with the actual flight, and they start to almost kind of like make fun of her and be skeptical of her skills, because they're like, she didn't do anything. She's probably a mediocre pilot at best. She's a woman. Come on. Like that's essentially like the way people were thinking back then about women, especially women in aviation, that it was kind of like a joke. So this really pisses off Amelia big time, because she has devoted most of her life to becoming a pilot, and a good one. So don't ask me why. I don't think you're going to like this part. George and Amelia get married. Yeah, like sleazy, shisty George. Like he gives me weird vibes. So anyway, she marries George. I guess underneath it all, he was probably a really sweet guy. I mean, I don't know. So she marries George. This is now her husband. And she's like, look, I'm tired of being the butt of everyone's jokes when it comes to females in aviation. I am tired of people saying that my flight, my transatlantic flight as the first woman, is a joke. I want to do my own transatlantic flight, and I want to like give it to them. So I'm doing it by myself. Put me in there solo. 4 years it took her to get this flight scheduled and on the books, and to get the NAA on board to support it. But Amelia did it. She was the first woman to pilot a single engine plane across the Atlantic. She started in Newfoundland, Canada, and she went straight across to Ireland. And it was a huge success. And she was so proud of herself, because now she was finally able to say, you can't say I didn't do it. And not only can you not say I didn't do it, but I did it without any help. Like a lot of pilots back then would have, because they didn't have the type of technology that we have now. I feel like a lot of pilots back then would always fly with a navigator, or maybe that's like what the co-pilot does. I don't know. But like there's always this navigator that's typically with the pilot. So she did it without a navigator. So she was just like, I'm a boss. I did this. You cannot come for me now, because I just proved to you that I can do anything because I just did it. This just sent her career over the moon. I mean, at this point, she became the face of women in aviation. She became an activist for not only women in aviation, but just women's rights in general. And she would go on to break numerous records. Like she was not done with that solo flight across the Atlantic. Like she's like, I'm just getting started, watch me. She would actually go on to set the record for fastest transcontinental flight by a woman. A year later, she went on to break that record and did the flight even faster. And among so many other things, she was recognized as the first person to fly solo over the Pacific Ocean from Hawaii to California. So our little Amelia is really starting to feel herself, and rightfully so, because she's done a lot of badass shit up to this point. So anyway, I think it's like 3 weeks before she turns 40. And I can relate to this, because before I turned 40, I wanted to do some crazy stuff just to like remind myself that I was still young and wild and free. And nice to know I had something in common with Amelia. It's not much, but I don't know. I imagine she was probably feeling the same way. And on July 2nd, 1937, at 39 years old, Amelia Earhart and her navigator, Fred Noonan, go on a trip around the world that Amelia pilots. But the most unfortunate thing happens. While they are over the Pacific Ocean, they disappear. Plane disappears, Fred and Amelia disappear. They're gone, all of it. It's estimated that the plane went down while it was in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of New Guinea and Howland Island, which is like a super tiny island that people barely and rarely ever even know about. But what kills me is that they were 22,000 miles into this trip when they went missing, which means they were almost home because the trip in total is just under 25,000 miles. So they were only 3,000 miles away from being home, done, set the record, feeling alive and free, about to turn 40. Like they were that close. Despite a massive search, they called it the largest single plane search by the US Navy of all time. Like they really wanted to find them. They tried. Now, this is where the conspiracy theories come into play, because Amelia and Fred's bodies were never found, and neither was the plane. I mean, it's giving like Bermuda Triangle vibes, but they weren't anywhere near it when it happened, so we can't go down that road. But remember that little island that like no one really ever hears about or knows about? Howland Island? In 1992, there was a little expedition group that went to that tiny island, Howland Island. And guess what they found on Howland Island? They found a shoe that was determined could have potentially fit Amelia. And they found a metal plate, like that you would eat off of, like a plate. They were in the area where the plane went down. So it's possible that those items came from either Fred or Amelia. And the reports from the expedition don't say that these things probably washed up on shore. They actually say that these things could have been placed on this island by Amelia or Fred or both. So does that mean that like they were on a part of the island where it couldn't have just washed up? Like, was it in a treehouse in the centermost palm tree? Like, I don't know. Like, I just don't know. And this leads to the juiciest juice of conspiracy theories. Because remember, Amelia is a married woman. She is married to that guy, George, the ringleader of all the press and PR. He's the man that she's married to. One of the theories is that perhaps Amelia and Fred fell in love on the trip. Wouldn't that be scandalous? And I don't know if Fred was married. But if they fell in love, either before the trip or on the trip, and they were like, we're almost home. We only have a couple thousand miles left of this trip. Like, this is our chance. See that little island down there? Like, we could go there and like live our own life and no one would know. And we could just like do our thing and be happily ever after. That's a conspiracy theory about how potentially them going missing was planned by them, either before or during the flight. They decided to put this little plan together. The other theory is that they crashed and that they somehow found their way to this little island and they tried to survive until they could get help. But obviously no one ever found them, or in theory, no one found them. But there's no proof of either one of those theories. So they're literally just gossip, conspiracy theories. So I guess we'll never know. Or maybe we will. And if you know, you should put it in the comments. So while this is a sad ending to two beautiful, brilliant lives that were just cut far too short, I want to leave you on a positive note. A young female pilot named Linda Finch, she spent her life obsessed with flying, aviation, airplanes. And Amelia was essentially a role model for her that she had learned about, heard about, followed, and just really aspired to be like. In 1997, Miss Linda Finch recreated Amelia's final flight. As a tribute to her idol, Amelia Earhart, Finch successfully completed the voyage. And she took the identical exact route that Amelia Earhart herself had mapped out and planned to take from start to finish, all 25,000 miles. And the way that Linda Finch designed it and planned it when she did it herself was that she would complete and finish the flight on what would have been Amelia Earhart's 100th birthday. Before I created this episode, I was thinking about all the women and people that inspire us to go after or to become a version of ourselves that we either tell ourselves that we're not worthy of or that other people tell us we'll never get. And it's just like, it just goes to show, like, someone like Amelia, who had so many setbacks. You know, she tried to do college and so many times she had to quit for whatever reason, whether it was money or her parents' relationship, or just flying or whatever it was. Like, but she just kind of kept going. And I feel like we often find ourselves in situations where we're just trying to follow our dream. And in theory, it all sounds like if you just follow your dream, it'll all work out. And a lot of following your dream is pivoting and rerouting and restarting and figuring it out on the fly. And I think that's what she proved. Women don't fly. Okay, fine, I won't fly. I'll find something else to do. No, she was like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to do it. I'm going to figure out how to do it. I'm going to own a plane, even if I have to work 5 jobs. I really want to go to college. And if it takes me 3, 5, 100 times, I'm just going to keep trying. Yeah, my dad's an asshole. And I have so much childhood trauma that I'm working through, but I'm not going to let it stop me from being the person that I want to be, the version of me that I want to be. So, you know, even though Amelia did not get to complete that global around the world flight, she accomplished so many other things, made history for so many other reasons, broke so many records, and it paved the way and inspired other women to go even further than she ever did. And Linda Finch is an example of that. It's like, you never know, like, when you're struggling to make it through something, whatever it may be, whether it's a relationship that's not working or a job that maybe, you know, layoffs are coming, or, you know, you're trying to start a business and it's just not working out, or, you know, you have kids and one of them just needs a lot more hand holding, a lot more of the time. And it's just like, I don't know how I'm going to do it all. And it's one of those things where it's like, you feel like you're failing, but you're not, because you keep showing up. And when you keep showing up, no matter what adversity and odds and obstacles are in your way, you're actually inspiring someone else who's watching you. They're just not telling you, but they're just so inspired by you continuing to get up every time you get knocked down. So always remember that you are literally just one more get up from being knocked down to your next success story. So I hope that you like this. Hope you like the transformation. I will list all the products that I used somewhere, but I promise by the next episode, I will have all that worked out. But yeah, I kind of hope this is something that you enjoyed and we can do it again. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you next time.